usual. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here. Many thanks for that. I hope we're doing something right. I guess we must be if you keep coming back. But do, if we have suggestions, come and make suggestions to us of how you'd like to see the meetings develop. So I'm sure Gary's open to variation, as am I.
Absolutely. Whatever anyone likes. We do this for everyone else, not just for us. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'll just let Gary kick off with the news. The schedule tonight's a bit all over the place because Ian is suffering there, not up to presenting. So sympathies to Ian. But thanks for coming anyway, Ian, to join in some degree, at least by attending. Doug's going to join us later. He can't come at the start. So I think Doug is going to present something. If not, we'll wing it in the best FMBug tradition. So go ahead, Gary, kick off.
I will kick off the news. Right, let me share my screen.
Half your screen.
Yes, I will share my screen. So while I can see it still. Hopefully you can all see that. Fingers crossed. So the news. I'll kick off with a couple of stories from Soliant. I'll preface this with all the usual stuff that we normally do, is the fact that Penny Ruddle still does an awful lot of the news, and she provides most of this for me. Her and Ben Hudson spend their life in FileMaker all day, every day, so they're the ones that are doing all the work, not me. As I mentioned at the last event, I've now left FP, but bless her, she's still supplying news for us. So I just wanted to kick off with this one, because I went through this and I did have a chat with Penny today and I went through some stuff, but there's a feed from Soliant about the advanced FileMaker Web Direct, and they go through some various articles in there about what Web Direct can be used for, how it works well, and some advanced features of it. Stuff like scaling horizontally is something that Web Direct can do, which is great. But they also go through some details about like security concerns using Web Direct and making web readers work well in Web Direct as well. So it's a useful read. It's worth going over. It's a recent post by Wim, and that's one for you to have a look and a gander at, really. The other one is something that they mentioned as well, which is about the multiple deployments of having multiple workers in Web Direct. And they were talking about the way Claris have deployed this and how they have implemented the routing and the spinning up and spinning down of this. And they've managed to find a bug with the Claris implemented the way it routes, but they mentioned how they do it, and there's an alternative. So, and there's workaround. So again, if you are using multiple web like workers for your Web Direct deployments, then this may be something that will affect you. So it's worthwhile having a look at that and go over this put a post out to Wim or anyone at Soliant, and they can help you out if need be, if you're suffering with this and having problems. So next in the news was basically something that I'd done for many a year, which is, I don't remember, I clicked twice. Did I click twice there? Did I click twice there? No, I didn't. So I'd done for a while, which is we had to deploy to nearly 200 users, and so it's a way of auto installing Claris across your platforms. I used Apple Remote Desktop. We had a large proportion of users on the Mac, and this article goes over, it's a video, and it goes over how to then deploy this. There's some coding you need to do, but the nice thing with this article, I only focused on the Mac because that was the mainstay of our business. We were like 80% Mac that used FileMaker. And as a consequence of that, we were able to, the article goes over how to deploy that, how to create a package installer with the assisted install text in there. So you can then go to Remote Desktop, you could highlight 50 odd machines, okay, deploy and install, and it'll go and install it on every machine. So it's a useful article if you've got a large deployment you need to do. And the nice thing with what DB Services have done, they've covered it for both platforms, which I think is really nice. They haven't just said, oh, we know how to do it on this one and not that one. So they tell you how to do this on a Windows platform. So, which is if you've got any clients that have got big deployments, it's worthwhile making maybe the IT teams that you work with, or you go in there aware that there is a facility of this, because the biggest pushback we always got from my support team that I used to work with at FP was more the point of the support team was like, oh God, there's been an update, I've got to deploy another 50 odd machines and update them. So if you couldn't update locally and it was a reinstall, it was a real pain to do that. So it's a useful article if you've got those sort of deployments. So this is something I wanted to mention is the Context podcast. There's a good, I've put all the details on there, but Martha Zink and Julie Signifus has gone through some stuff and covered all of the stuff of what's going to go on in Claris Engage in 2025. And they're giving sneak previews and various bits and pieces. It's a good podcast to go over, and it gives you an introduction to what's going to happen to Claris Engage. More on the news was this one. As I thought this was a great article. So this is a full breakdown that FileMaker Hacks have done about. It's basically a training session that they've got, which covers basically JSON and how it's integrated within FileMaker. And they cover all aspects of it, from custom functions to like other related articles they've done and JSON querying. But it's a very comprehensive, and all this is the website is a list of links to a load of training documents of how to do things. And as I say, all of these are the list that there. I know it's small, but if you go to the link, there's about 25 different articles there of how to do stuff with JSON. So I think it doesn't matter how proficient you are in using JSON within FileMaker, I'm sure there's going to be an article there that's going to help you out. There's going to be something in there that you go, oh, I didn't realize I could do that, or I didn't realize I could do this. I thought it was a really good summary sheet of anything you want to do with JSON within FileMaker is pretty much covered there as a starting point. So good article, I thought. So. Finally, the other one I want to talk about is there's two AI podcasts that are on the Claris Talk AI. One with Ian Jemison, the other one with Ronnie Ross, and they are really good. It's something we've been covering here. Certainly on our sessions, that AI has become a massive topic of how to integrate AI within FileMaker. And these two podcasts are really, really good stepping on point and more detailed talks about the ins and outs of how AI can benefit the FileMaker platform and how to use it and how to integrate with it. So it is definitely the talking point. Everyone's talking about it and trying to find ways to do things with AI. So I thought that was a useful one to see as well. I wanted to talk about this, the Dig FM. Robert has done something where he's putting it out there that they are doing a session on the 13th of March where they're doing a poll of covering all the newly introduced features. And I think it's that thing that we always suffer with FileMaker, is the fact that they may go, oh, we've released 25 new features, but we never know what they are and what they do. And it's only the community that usually go around using these things and bring it to light that these things are available. They're covering not an open mic session, but they're going to go over all the features. They're going to try and poll and try and find out who knows about what new features are there, who's using them, and trying to get an idea of all the new features and the exposure that the community is using them. I think it's a really good idea. It'd be great if there was a regular poll every time there was a new release of FileMaker. I think that would be a really useful thing, because it would enlighten us to go, oh, we didn't realize there was this function, and this could be used within the platforms that we use and how we deploy stuff. So again, another good feed. Wanted to put a call out to the Vienna, the Austria conference that's been announced, and this is, it's not a replacement for .fm, but it's basically the next version of it. But Christian's here and he can talk to you more about it. So I wanted to give it a plug, and I certainly think it's something that we should be looking at. It's the European event, and it's that always been that place where you can get together, have a really good technical session with like-minded people. And as I say, if there's a session, if there's more you want to talk about that, Christian, please do, so you can chip in at a later point and discuss it in more detail if you want.
Well, yes, we have met for 10 years in Berlin for .fmp, and since Egbert stopped doing it, Philip and Stefan took the chance to make their own conference. So you have the chance to get to an English-speaking conference with people from all over Europe and a few Americans. We talk about FileMaker in detail. It's more like the higher level, the more advanced level, where a lot of nerds talk about it. There may be sessions where you talk a full hour just about perform script on server, or how to best do your let statements. It's located in Vienna, in the middle of the city, so you can just walk everywhere. There are over 70 people already signed up, and still 30 places are available. Yeah, the schedule is filling quickly, as everyone who comes is expected to maybe talk about something if they have something to share.
It is what it is. I think if anyone's been to .fmp, then yeah, it's a high level sessions, and but it is that point where you can just sit around a table and have a chat with people and have ideas about things and find out different ways of doing stuff. So I think it's a great thing that it's continued on. It may be in a different guise and different type of event, but hopefully it ends up very similar to what the .fmp managed to achieve. There was many a time people learned an awful lot going to that. So
yeah, you probably can't see the note, the chat, but John's just reminded us that the Engage EU has just been announced in Antwerp for 9th to 11th of November as well. Another great conference.
Exactly, both of those are good. Europe's got some good conferences going on for FileMaker now, which is great. And then finally, this is a plea, and this is not mandatory, but I do want to bring it up. Jules been doing this way longer than I have, and I've only been doing it for a really small amount of time that Jules has been doing it. But we're incurring costs and bits and pieces to do things, and we've created a buy us a coffee page, basically. It's just something to give us some funds to keep things going. It is not mandatory. We are going to do this as long as we can, but there are times and there's costs incurred in producing this and making this happen. And we do our best to do this for free, and we've done it for now 80 sessions for free. And the world is a different place now to what it was when we first started, and unfortunately there are costs that are being incurred, and certainly our time. But we know that you guys are the reasons why this event works. You come and present. You're the ones that make this event what it is. And this is no way something to force anyone's hand. If you are comfortable donating £10 as a one-off to us, it would help massively, but it's your choice if you want to do that. So all it is the link is there. Donate if you feel like you want to, and that's all I ask. You can donate anonymously if you want, if you don't want to be known. If you do whatever you like, I don't really care. But Joel and I have had a conversation about this for many months, if not years, about should we, shouldn't we, and we're getting to the point now where it's becoming hard for us to keep this going for free. So we're doing the best we can, but any donation would help. That's all I'm asking for.
And thanks to those who've donated already.
Yeah, there's some that's donated already, which is thank you very much. It goes a long way, so I appreciate it. The virtual bar continues as always after the events, and there will always be discussions, so please stick around if you can stick around to after the normal speaking events. I know sometimes it ends up a very late event. I think it was last time I finished at about 11:30. I'm not asking you to finish that late. That was a very long one, but we have the virtual bar at the end. So, and on that note, that is the news. So I managed to get through it, and I can still see my screen, so it's not too bad. So, which is good.
Gary, thanks very much.
I've got to find a way to stop sharing. Hold on. Too small. Superb, brilliant. Right, all yours, Joel.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much indeed. Thanks for that. According to my schedule and my agenda, I'm up next. It's going to be a bit. I see someone's donated. Thank you. Someone's listening to you, Gary. It's going to be a bit ad hoc because I didn't have any time to do it, to do anything a bit more than a very surface look at what I did. This comes about from one of my customers who came to me and said, I'm just going to find my notes actually, just bear with me a moment. One of my customers came along to me and said, could we start to use Cursor to speed up the scripting process? So I went away and thought about it, and he pointed me at an article by Matt Trotsky, I'm never quite sure how to pronounce his name, on using AI to do scripting within FileMaker, which was very interesting. A salient point is that he made that video in June 2024. By the time I looked at it in about November or December, it was things had already progressed significantly beyond where we were then. But I was curious, so I thought, well, I'll just give it a go. And Ian had talked about using Claude. So I thought, well, I'll see what happens. I'll dip my toe in and see if there's any, because I got to provide them an answer. I was pretty skeptical at first, thought we wouldn't be getting anywhere. So I installed Claude. Unfortunately, I didn't really have much time to integrate Cursor. I've actually got it now, but I haven't really been able to play with it very much, so I don't know the full extent of it. But I'll take you through what I did. So first thing I asked Claude was, I said, do you know anything about FileMaker? In fact, I think I'm going to share this screen with you. If I don't put my mouse over the place that don't put my mouse over the place that cuts off my screen. Right. Let me share my screen. If I can find the right window. I've got so many windows open at the moment, but finding the right one is quite hard. Is that the right one? Yeah, I think that's the right one. Can you see that screen, everybody?
Nigel, nothing.
No.
Well, bear with me a second. I can press the button.
Yes.
There you go.
There we go.
That's good.
Okay. So these are the prompts that I gave it. I said, do you know anything about FileMaker? And it claimed to indeed know something about FileMaker. Hang on one second, just 1 second. Being interrupted by a small child, which I will deal with instantly, and then I'll be back with you. I'll give it to you in about 20 minutes. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Apologies for the delay. Think amongst yourselves briefly whilst I do this. Okay, found this.
Just going to say that some of the stuff that I was going to show would actually follow on really well from this. So I could probably show you maybe 5 minutes after Jules done.
That would be great.
It would tie in really nicely.
That'd be great, Ian. Superb.
Yeah, apologies for that
We'll have to
interruption.
keep it short,
Now
though.
sorted. Yeah, that would be fantastic, Ian. If you're up to 5 minutes of that, that would be great. So, do you know anything about FileMaker? I don't know if you can read that. So I can make it bigger.
See bits of it.
So I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head and see what happens when I do that. So, having been assured that it knew about FileMaker, which I took with a large pinch of salt, I gave it that prompt. So I told it as much as I thought it needed to know about creating a script in FileMaker and the details it would need, provided it knew something. So I gave it some field names, some non-field names, some table names, told it about running in the card window, and asking it to log the script. It's basically send an email script. So first it summarized what it was going to do. Then it told me the extra fields and tables it would need. And then it came up with a script, which, see if I can get this a bit bigger. It's a bit bigger. No, I can't really get it a bit bigger. And I also, I wonder, maybe I'll share my whole screen so that I can show you in FileMaker as well. I just used one of the standard databases. Let me just reshare. I'm going to stop sharing that screen and share both screens. Find that now. Okay, there it is. So this is just the standard contacts database in FileMaker, which I used as a template. And this is what it came up with. I hope you can read that. Is that legible? That screen? Anybody?
It's pretty small.
Pretty small,
Pretty
yeah.
small.
Pretty small.
If
Okay.
you if you've got MBS installed, you can just click the plus button in the top right, and that'll expand the size of it.
Thank you, Ian. Good point.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah,
Thank you,
cheers,
Christian. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Right. So first thing I noticed was that it did some nice commenting, which is good. The scripting it came up with at this first attempt was okay, slightly pedantic, one or two things that weren't going to work. But all things considered, it was not a bad attempt. And it was certainly quicker than writing that from scratch, I would say, for a newish developer. Because I had thought originally that, having seen Matt Petrowski's video, that what we would be looking at would be helping people to learn what FileMaker scripts did, giving new users some indication to point them in the direction of how to write a script, but probably not a very optimal script, which is slightly confirmed. I thought it might help analyze a few things. But I was actually more impressed than that, because it actually came up with this. It's a long-winded way. It's kind of how I'd expect someone who was fairly new to FileMaker to write a script, if they were reasonable. It does things, it makes some mistakes. Like there, this one, it didn't really check where it was. So it could create a new record anywhere, which would probably be in the message table rather than the log table. But by and large, it was easy to do, and even without using a piece of software I can never remember whose name is this one here, to write it and to integrate with it. It was actually quite easy just to cut and paste pieces in, or to type pieces in. And it kind of did what it did. That was the main error. It just did an error track in the right place, and it repeated the code there that would have been a lot easier to simplify. But with a little bit of work, you could get that working quite easily, which I thought was interesting. It was more than I'd expected. What I did quite like was it told me afterwards what it did, which is summarized here, and made some notes about it, which were quite sensible suggestions. So then I updated my prompt with using a case statement instead of if with multiple or statements, verifying all email addresses, and it rewrote the script, which I haven't implemented in FileMaker because I ran out of time. I'll go through it slowly-ish, just to give you an idea. I haven't actually verified whether any of this works or not, this particular piece. But at first glance, it looks like a good basis. Slightly pedantic again. But this, without me asking, it came up with the key changes that it had made down here. Told me what it did. The rest is irrelevant of this. So that was just a very quick dipping my toe in, look at how it would work. So that's kind of it. I'm open to comments, suggestions, discussion, whatever people want to say. Is it interesting? Do you think you might use it?
Can I ask some questions about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the brief conversation that you had with it and then told it what to do, it came back with that. How easy was it to then take the content from what it said and paste it in? Was it easy or was it complicated? Because obviously you had to create the fields first, otherwise you lose all the references.
Yes. Yeah, so I set up the table in the fields.
Yeah.
Because I was doing it this way without the intervention of Ian, remind me what this piece of software is called. Which you probably recognize. Because I'm just having a
So I take it that then.
No, I'm sorry. What is
Rainbow Sys? Cohere or something? I'll look it up. I've got it in my notes somewhere.
So the idea of this was the fact that you paste that into there as text and it converts it into
basically you can transfer it more easily into FileMaker. I do actually make a note. I did make a note here somewhere. Cursor.
Right.
Yeah. So I was using Claude 3.7 Sonnet, FileMaker 21.1, and Sonoma and Cursor for the writing AI. Ian can tell you a lot more about Cursor, I suspect, than I can.
No, that's fine. My point is that I think it's a quick.
From what I saw in the video, it's much easier to write your scripts and integrate them using Cursor. But I did first dip in long way, just copy and paste what I needed to copy and paste. And it does things like, if I go back to this one, it does things like just say set the field, if not empty, is that. So it really wants a table name before it, but it hasn't got one.
Yeah.
So it's just minor changes you make to it to do that.
But then you'd find out when you paste it in anyhow. So you
exactly
know what you're doing. It wouldn't take long to do that.
No.
No, I'm impressed it's commented it. I think that's really good because that's a shortcut that most people do. Certainly earlier developers, I would say, don't comment as much as they should do. And therefore, as a consequence of that, it's harder for us to then pick up after the fact. I think I mentioned this in the last conversation we had. It might have been in the virtual bar at the end of the last session. So my only concern I have with all AI stuff, yes, it helps. It helps us seasoned developers that know what we're doing. But I think it also does give you a step up, an entry point for a new user to do it. But I think a new user would get stuck quite quickly because they wouldn't notice there wasn't a table there. They wouldn't notice that this thing didn't have, for example, it going off and then running off new records in the wrong tables and stuff like that. I think that's always been my concern, but I do agree. I think it's an easy way for someone to go, oh, right, that's how I do find a not is empty, because they may not realize they can do a not in front of an is empty. You see, because everyone knows how to find is empty because it's in the list, but they don't know to put the operators in front of it or behind it or around it. So I think it's great. I think it's clever. It clearly knows, which is superb. And it's taken that from a piece of text, which I think is quite remarkable, really.
Well, yeah, I think it is remarkable, and you can get it so it'll do it if you speak to it as well, which is even more remarkable. I did think it'd be really quite useful for commenting existing scripts. If it's that successful at understanding a script, it's another experiment I'd like to do. Is I'd like to take a slightly more complicated script and ask it to comment the script.
Oh, that'd be superb. Yeah, that'd be great.
Great, because I think we've all got solutions which have far too few comments in, and it would be really useful and time saving to get them commented.
Joe?
So
Yeah.
there's actually two things you can do like that. So you can summarize the script, and then you can, basically search if you're looking for a specific script via the semantic search, and adding comments. Obviously you need to do that within the code, but both of them are valuable for documenting and understanding a bigger system.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I wanted to make another comment was, there's kind of two general ways to do this, right? Of the current code assist out there is you have things like Claude, and there's a directory. I don't know, Chris, if you have this handy, like made with Claude, where you can just find things that are already out there. But anyways, Claude and V0 Dev, you're basically pulling them into your system, and V0 Dev is similar to Claude, but you can actually import, it gives you a link and you can import it right into VS Code. And then the other way is with Cursor or Windsurf or Aider, and there's one more, I'm forgetting the name, that's pretty popular. There's like 3 big ones that are out there, where you're in the code editor and you have a panel on the side that can either do assist, or it can actually manipulate your files and say, is this okay? And you accept the changes and everything. But the third thing I wanted to say is, have you seen Todd Geist's video that's out there of what he's developing?
No, I haven't seen it.
And maybe John wants to advertise that this, there may be a discussion about this in April FMDisc, maybe, I don't know, but anyways, he is developing a code assist for FileMaker, that will directly transfer the code back.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see that, actually.
It's I've watched it. It's one of those. It's Todd in his workshop, so it's not polished.
Right.
One of his stated points is this is a way to help when you're writing scripts to deal with fat fingers and mistyping things, right? So the code is perfectly formed. And then Todd managed to demonstrate that every time he types in a box during the video to ask a question, he gets something wrong and he has to redo it, which is quite entertaining because it's clearly he has the problem that he's not able to spell correctly, and that slows down his script creation. So I laughed a lot, basically. But it's one of those, watching somebody do something who's brave enough to do hey, I'm playing with this and this is me working with it and it's real, is really inspiring to see, real stuff happening, isn't it?
Yeah, and he just built this right in his, as far as I know, in his free time in his workshop.
It must have been a lot of free time to do that.
I don't know, but I know it's still early, but you can see the promise, though, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this stuff is the future. It's, yeah, for sure.
Obviously, the technical task is taking something that you might regard in another IDE as code. So here's what's going to happen in it, and actually turning it into the XML that is pastable into FileMaker without breaking it. That's the kind of technical task. But once that technical task is solved, then you theoretically should be able to feed this machine with text in the right format. So therefore that opens the door to not just using Claude to write your script for you, but using some IDE to write your own script. You don't have to use AI to write your scripts, but it's the fact that you can write a script in something that looks like text and then paste it into this machine that converts it. That's where the cleverness part of it works. And that's not specifically related to AI ultimately. You almost certainly, Todd will have used AI to help him build that translator. But once that's built, then that's the hard bit done effectively. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna, Joel.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, Gary, all that's really interesting stuff, and it's a two-way street. And I was talking to Vince Milano at Beeswax, so informally, so these are my words, not his, but he was looking to do with Inspector. We were chatting about stuff and AI uses, of course, working with the XML. And he thinks we'll get there where you can just say, tell me what the script does. And once you be commented, you could probably set that up. It'll just give you a nice text block telling you what the script does and why. And because of the comparison stuff, what's been changed in it, but almost sort of in language terms. And that, of course, if anyone who works on legacy systems will be great. Tell me what the script does. Tell me what this app does.
Well, that is
AI go through the XML and produce a report going, this is what it does, apart from the problems, but just what does it do? What's it trying to do here?
Yeah, that was one of the features that leapt out at me, having picked up numerous legacy systems and struggled for hours trying to work out what the hell someone else had done in a very complicated way. Yeah, I think it could really help with that.
Time saving, right?
The question I ask is, how do you upload that sort of solution? That's the bit that I'm stuck with. So you've worked with us, Joel, so you know how big EPOS DB is. It's huge. So it's, if I was to take an app like that and deploy it, and it's got like, I don't know, it's 100 odd tables, and I mean hundreds of thousands of scripts, and I do mean hundreds of thousands of scripts. It's like, it's interesting to, and I actually think the AI technology out there that could analyze that stuff and then come back with a very detailed summary. I'm just struggling to how the hell you upload the damn thing to it and let it go there. So that would be the issue. But I totally agree. If you've got our code on our scripts is put into sections and so forth. So you could take a section, upload those script elements to it, say summarize this, and it'll come back and go, right, brilliant. Oh, by the way, you've got dependencies here, here, and here. And that'd just be a golden, absolutely golden to go. If I go and change this, here's the impact of what it's going to do.
I mean, that was my first thought, is that you would take, you say, okay, well, I'm really interested in how we manage the mailing out, and how we with the packaging for the mailing and so forth that we've got in the system. So can you just look at this aspect of it? We've got trouble with getting the right labels for the right packages. Which scripts affect that? Which tables affect that? Where's the problem? So it's a bug fixing thing. But then you've got the other side of that, which is optimization.
You're talking about going from the top down as opposed to, sorry to interrupt it, but so what we did was we took every single script, right? And made embeddings of it. I'm sorry, we summarized it and then made embeddings, and so that we could tell what each script did.
Well, that would be.
I can't remember the order we did it in, Chris. Do you remember?
I don't.
You might be. We're half listening and working.
that makes. I mean, it's a very logical and sensible.
Start with the chunk. You already have chunks, right? You have your scripts. And so if you can summarize the scripts, and the longer scripts are more problematic, and then, especially on these big systems, the DERs are so large, then you can, you can easily search for any field you want. So you have the list of scripts that touch every field, right? Which maybe Christian already does that. But you also have the summarization of what it does. And so you can kind of do a semantic search on that as well. So that's more the bottom up than
Yeah,
having
I
the
think,
whole, but maybe you do both, like you were
yeah, I
just
was going to
saying.
say, I think there's use cases for both. Yeah, I think yeah, the route you're talking out, bottom up, is good practice, certainly, to make life easier for other developers who come and take over your system, or you want to train up. But there's also a use case for tackling it the other way.
Yeah, and so you just make another table and here's your scripts and your summarizations and your,
Yeah.
you know, embeddings, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I think
think that could be certainly an avenue we would look at on the bigger solutions that we've got, is the fact that you could put that large script in there and say, can you break this into subscripts or more efficient subscripts? Because we know we've got inefficiencies in our scripts because they're legacy. That's the way they are. That's the way they've evolved. So there's certainly scope there to take a very detailed script, which could be hundreds of lines of script, and say, break this into sections, summarize it, isolate which thing is doing which, what impact it's having, and see whether there's ways to make this more efficient. Certainly just commenting it enough would be a starting point in some instances.
Actually, in a lot of other programming languages, one of the main uses of this kind of stuff is to write test coverage for code.
Yeah.
Now, I know that's not like a big deal in the FileMaker world, but if you could basically have it write tests for the FileMaker scripts, that would be kind of interesting.
But it's something that should be done. I mean, we need to test the FileMaker, right?
Yeah, but I mean, come on, how many people really do it?
That's true. That's true.
True. Yeah. Ian, did you say you had a little bit to follow on that you could do for 5 minutes?
Yeah, this will just be like sort of 5 minutes. I unfortunately have not been able to prep anything major, but just following up from what you showed with the talking to Claude.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at MCP servers. So MCP is Model Context Protocol, which is it's a framework from Anthropic for dealing with AI agents. And I started looking at, could I write one for helping with FileMaker? And the first thing I did was to basically just sort of query tasks. If I share my screen, get the right screen, because I usually get the wrong one. That's not it. I'll just bring up Claude. One second. Okay, so if I say tools are available, so you can see I've got a couple that are related to FileMaker. I've got one that'll list FileMaker, what layouts are in a database, what scripts are in, and to give information on. So the first one I wrote was to get tasks. So I'd say I used the FileMaker sample database tasks to do this. I ask Claude, what are my outstanding tasks? Claude itself has no idea, but it knows that I've got a tool to do that. So if I say allow for this chat, it'll go off and it'll find, oh, of course. Anyway, let's try the next thing. Oh, so if we say, what layouts are in the task database? Allow for this chat. It's gone off and it's basically returned the list of layouts during the task database, and I can say what scripts. Now, that by itself isn't really too interesting. So it tells me what scripts I've got. So essentially, I've just written a server that exposes a bunch of data about this file or files. At the moment, it's like really, really basic. So it's got like hard-coded authentication. It's not generalized. It's just talking to like really one to my dev server, nothing else. But where this gets more interesting is, and I'll show you a recording here because it worked perfectly this time. Well, not perfectly, but it worked this time. And I'll pause this a couple of times. So I'll basically say, so if I say write a JavaScript function to show me this stuff, well, it knows that it can call the tools that it's got available. So that JavaScript function can call the tool, rather Claude will call the tools while it's writing the function. It turns out Claude Sonnet 3.7 is really, really good at writing code. So what I've now done is now got the information that it needs to write a JavaScript function to get the information. Do that, and then now there's a few things here that actually would need to be adapted that wouldn't quite work, but very little. That was pretty darn. So that says it assumes I've got a FileMaker script to return a get tasks data. Oh, sorry, I showed the wrong demo. Because the next step I did was I basically told Claude to rewrite that. But instead of doing that, to use the FileMaker data API. And it knows enough about the FileMaker data API that it was able to write a function that good. If I just going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second and I'll just find you the screenshot because I basically don't want to go digging through all the screenshots that I've got. So the thing that the tools in this case can do, there we are. 1 second. The thing the tools that can be useful for is it can return kind of the metadata about the system that it needs to write code. And I basically asked it to like wrap it in, write the HTML code, and it did this first time, and this is what it came out looking like. I mean, and that took like a couple of minutes. Then admittedly, there was a bunch of patching, a few things up behind the scenes to basically get it, with authentication, but it was like really, really impressive. So that just kind of, I just sort of thought that kind of a tool usage to give you that metadata about the solution fit in nicely with what you're talking about if you're looking at writing code.
Yeah.
Now, I've done that with Claude, but Cursor, actually, sorry, I'm going to share 1 second more. I promise this will be the last, and then I will be done. So Cursor here, Cursor actually supports MCP servers. So I've tried to get this to work. So this works in Claude, but it doesn't work in Cursor for some reason, and I've not been able to work out why. It knows the tool is there, but I've not yet debugged why that's not working. So if I say, because I was thinking here that actually I could just if I got it working in Cursor, I could just say to Cursor in this chat console, I could basically just say, write me an app to do X, Y, Z. It'll go out, get all the information about the database connection that it needs and build everything from there. But I've not yet got that working. I don't know. I spent a couple of hours this afternoon, but I'm just a little bit too brain dead to figure out where it was going wrong.
But I mean, if you've got that far that quickly, Ian, I mean, it's got to be coming. It's got to be possible.
Yeah, it is possible. And actually, what I've been seeing is a lot of comments that the MCP support in Cursor is very new, and a lot of people are having trouble with it. So, because it's a very new thing. So, anyway.
But yeah, great follow on that. Yeah.
So,
Also, something that I thought of when you were talking there was Heidi's talk about going from the bottom up and having documented all the scripts. Once you got to that point, you could continue on to drilling down into the scripts, and say, well, what does this one do? And you could use the data for that, which would be an interesting extension to it. But generally, I think there's a whole new world of possibilities opening up to us. Anyone else want to pitch in?
Can I ask
I
one
had
question?
one more.
Go,
Oh.
Bradley.
One. Oh,
Oh,
one
Kate.
question.
Sorry,
for-
Kate. It's Kate. Sorry.
Oh, okay. One question for Ian. How long did it take you to build the tool, in the framework that you were discussing for Claude? And when you enable those tools, are they enabled account wide? So for any conversations, those tools are available?
I'll tackle the second part first. They're not available account wide. I'll show you where they are in Claude. In Claude, you configure them in settings, and that's on the other screen. And under developer. And then down here, this shows the tools and the demo. And if I edit
see.
the configuration file, which is of course open up in the other window. So this at the moment is like very much a person by person. So what I've got is like, it's basically a JSON configuration with MCP servers. And then we've got the different and then the command that actually runs the server.
Right.
In terms of how long to build it, getting it working the first time took me a little bit. But once I got the first one working, there's a couple of different frameworks that people are now starting to appear to help make this a bit easier.
Right.
And there's two different ways it can work. It can either work from a command line, or it could run sort of as it's not a RESTful server, but like over an HTTP interface that accepts JSON as a command. So yeah, the first one, I mean, I probably had something working like in a day. And then once you've got it working, you could actually add to it. But it's, to be honest, it's kind of a pretty ropey demo, really, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But, well, not even version 1. At that point, I just wanted to see, could I even make anything work at all?
Right. It's just, can I get these pieces to work together?
Exactly. And then if I can get them, and I would tidy it up a lot, but I'm a little bit, until I've got it working with Cursor as well. I'm more concerned about, like, why is that not working? Is there something wrong with what I've done so far?
Right.
And once I've got that sorted out, then I'll go back and tidy it up and make it a more general purpose thing.
Yeah. Very cool.
Very cool. Excellent. Well, yeah, very cool indeed.
Oh, thanks.
I think we're on schedule to move on, or a bit late actually. Kate, are you all right sticking with your slot at the end? I'll get Doug to say something now, if that's okay.
That works for me.
Works for you, Doug. Bring it on. I think you're going to talk about some of the new features coming.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I just wanted to actually sort of show you some of the stuff that is going to be shown at Engage, and we've been starting to actually sort of kind of redo face-to-face partner meetings in Europe. So eventually, I think we'll do the same in the US and globally. So we had a session in London 2 weeks ago. We had one last week in Italy, Milan, with partners and customers. And one of our mission is to get people on board with AI. So I know everyone basically in this team and all the people that basically work properly around FileMaker and already basically in the know and actually using it. But when we talk to the sort of global community of partners, large customers, community in general, it's there's a lot of people basically not really sure exactly maybe where we're going, not exactly what they can do with AI inside the FileMaker, or if there's any point in actually doing anything in AI and FileMaker. And so one of the things we're trying to actually really get people to kind of understand is the idea that we're going to help you at first leverage AI to actually help you run your data. In terms of development, we could do some stuff in the future, I think, to be able to actually use AI to kind of fix your scripts, your layout, stuff like that. But in order for actually to do that, we need to actually do kind of a cleanup in the XML. So we've done some updates in how we actually export the XML from the FileMaker file to represent everything inside it. But it's getting there, but it's not really there 100%. We're still having issues with creating IDs for every type of objects in all the catalogs. So that's going to take a bit of time, but we're kind of getting there. So instead of actually sort of saying this idea that, hey, you could use AI to create like scripts or layout in FileMaker, we want to make sure that we can help the global part of Claris customers. Essentially, one thing we've noticed is around the data quality and the data insights. And so one of the things we're really sort of pushing is hey, like you've seen before, is semantic search is a really nice way for you to be able to actually get some better insights. When we talk to a lot of customers, sometimes they go, yeah, we're trying to actually use a dashboard and stuff like that. But the one thing we have is we know we have slightly crappy data because people haven't actually inputted the data properly into the system, and we don't really know how to actually fix it. And we wish we could actually have more way around it. And so one of the things, and I'll share my screen, one of the things we've been working on is, so in the current version in FileMaker, we've given instruction on people on how to actually leverage a OpenLLM on their server. The idea is you go through the blog entry, you install an environment like Miniforge or Conda, and then you start doing stuff. And when I talk to customers, even when they have like IT people and they have people that basically have good understanding, for them it's kind of scary. It's like, well, we see in this world where AI is meant to be really easy to install, and then when we look at what you're doing at Claris, it seems to be kind of hard. And so some of the work basically is being done by the FileMaker team to make it easier is to leverage a bit more what we have inside the admin console to be able to replicate this manual aspect that you have through the blog to actually do it in the admin console of FileMaker server. The one great thing that we already have inside admin console is most of our users know how it works. And the one thing which is always kind of great as well with the FileMaker server, in terms of licensing, you can actually have multiple install of a FileMaker server to run the admin console, which means that you could actually potentially have a Claris FileMaker running on a specific type of machine that is made for LLM and running LLMs without having any databases running on side of it, because the licensing of FileMaker and Claris is going to allow you to do that. So when we actually list that to the ETS, a lot of people were saying, well, you shouldn't be running your LLM model on the same machine where you have your databases. And I'm saying is, well, you have a license that allows you to have a FileMaker server not running FileMaker files, but in this case, running open source LLM. So we've created this nice kind of interface for people to be able to easily manage basically running open source machines on their systems. So the first time you actually enable that, when you click on running, all you have to do pretty much is go to a GitHub page, you download the environment to actually run your OpenLLMs. We use Miniforge. And then below that, you're going to have access to be able to easily download the open source model that we've tested inside the FileMaker, but you'll pretty much be allowed to actually install any open source model that you can actually get from Hugging Face. So the 4 that we have basically ready to be downloaded are the mini LM, which is for the text one, the image embedding, the clip one that we actually use, and we have one from Google, and a multi-language environment. And all you have to do is click on one. It will actually download the stuff, and then you can actually use that in your system. And the idea is we want to get people to actually start using it for semantic session find, because eventually we want them to actually start using that so that they get accustomed to, in the future, doing LLM training, fine tuning, because this is where it's going to be really useful for customers and partners to be able to actually get better insights from their data. The other thing we kind of doing on top of it is the one thing which is really cool with semantic search is because we're giving you a lot more control over how you can actually, what you're actually getting in terms of the data. The work that we're doing is, instead of actually doing the search on the client, the idea is to actually get everything done on the server. So with the next version of FileMaker, when you're doing support semantic find, instead of actually doing the search locally on your client, it's going to do everything on the server. And that's going to speed up basically your queries. And because you're controlling how many records how they come back, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So if I do a quick case on this, and I'm pretty sure if I do a test on in demo, it's not going to work as quickly as imagine. The first quick search is actually a bit slower, but when basically the engine is actually running, when I do another one, so if I do, what's the one I tried before? Forbidden Planet. The query is basically going to be quicker and quicker because it's actually saving everything on the server. So the idea is you have a lot of data, you're basically doing all the searches on the server side. And at the same time, while we're actually sort of working on making those queries work quick on the server, we're having to actually make some updates in the tools that we use to actually do those SQL queries. So when you're actually using perform semantic find, what we're doing in the background is we have this kit inside of Draco, which is called the FMLLM kit. That kind of translate basically your natural language questions into a SQL query that we can actually send to the machine learning engine. And for that query to be a lot quicker, we're doing some upgrade to the SQL engine. So we use something called Antler 4, and we're updating that so that the queries, basically the SQL queries, can actually be a lot quicker. And then we can add other functions on top of that so that we're actually leveraging on more things. So even though like a couple of years, maybe or 10 years ago, people were saying, well, basically SQL is dead and SQL engine FileMaker is dead. Well, actually now we're actually spending quite a bit of time actually working on it, because in order for us to be able to do better semantic finds, better things around chats with an AI engine or inside the FileMaker, we're going to leverage basically SQL engine, because that is one thing that open source models or even OpenAI models understand quite nicely. It is SQL queries. And we're doing quite a bit of work. So there's going to be a lot of demos at Engage for those who are going. So Ronnie is going to do a bit of it. Wade is going to do some demos around it as well, like under the hood. And kind of the job that I'm trying to do up to Engage is, in terms of partners, customers going there, is just to make sure is, if you haven't used it yet, start sort of playing around with FileMaker, so that the time you actually get to Engage, you'll have the basic understanding of what semantic search is. So when you go to the sort of under the hood sessions, you have more information, and then you can actually start talking to the engineers at Engage and the PMs in terms of what can be actually sort of done in the future. So now that we have a new CEO who's really bullish on the AI side of it, ongoing is we have to be there before the others, but we have to be there where it matters for our customers and our partners. And we're thinking that for the time being, data insight is where people are going to think, oh, it's going to help me have a better environment, manage my data properly. In terms of actually coding inside of FileMaker, I think it's going to take a few more cycles, but eventually we'll actually sort of get there. Yeah, that was the other work that we're doing heavily. For those who've actually maybe heard it, there's something that we're calling data everywhere. And the idea is because we have this Claris platform where we have FileMaker, Connect, and Studio, we need a central API for all of that to actually talk to each other properly. The ESS Plus that we created for FileMaker to talk to Studio and vice versa wasn't great. It's really slow. There's not a lot you can do. When you update a record, it doesn't really work properly. When we want to get Studio to talk to Connect, it's not ideal. When we want to get FileMaker to talk to Connect, it's not ideal as well. So we're basically investing quite a bit of time on OData because there's a lot more things that we can do with the data that we've currently done. Currently, OData is actually going through the web server port, so it's being slow. So what we're working on is having OData on its own next to the Draco engine so that it could be more powerful at generating queries, getting data back and forth. And it's allowing us to be able to actually connect FileMaker and Studio to actually kind of talk better in a way that we can actually sort of do before. And so the idea is we want to have a system whereby you have data in FileMaker, you want to call it in your Studio forms or whatever. We're going to use OData and Connect to be able to actually do some data management, some trigger, some field triggering, stuff like that to make your life a lot easier. So while in the past, we weren't, in some cases, 100% sure exactly how we're going to get FileMaker and Studio to actually sort of talk to one another, I think now we've actually sort of got to a point where we kind of know what we did in the past wasn't working. We kind of know is where we want to get to. And technically is we have already the tools, we have the expertise inside. We just need to sort of clean some of the code that we have inside of FileMaker and Studio and get everything to actually sort of talk together. And so that way it will be a lot easier for people to actually really see the value that Studio can actually bring, or Studio Connect can bring to your FileMaker solutions in terms of various sort of web development, stuff like that. So that was a bit of stuff for me. There's going to be way more at Engage. Everything is going to get recorded. I think we're going to try to actually get the keynote on YouTube as quickly as we can. Normally, like post-prod is complete like 2-3 weeks. I think that's pretty much what we're going to have. And the idea is to actually have those sessions quicker than last year. Last year, I think it took a huge amount of time to get everything back on the site. But we want to get that information as quickly as we can, so that people can actually sort of view it. Not everyone can make it to the US. Not everyone can actually afford maybe to spend a week out of work going to the US. But we want to make sure people know what's going on and know what they should be looking for in the next version of FileMaker. I think there's a quick question from John. So for the time being, you can't turn off all the services not required by the server, but we're looking into actually seeing if that's doable. Potentially, yeah, you will be able to actually run only the servers or the daemons that you need to actually have maybe the AI working, and not the rest.
That's great.
John, did you ask that question because of concerns having AI platforms running on secure networks?
No, it's a more generalized question. So at the moment, when we install server, we choose whether we additionally want WebDirect on it. But in theory, if you had a WebDirect worker and there was a mechanism to say, actually, I only need this service to be running, that almost certainly could make it more performant because you're not running services you don't need. And if those services have a tendency to run away with memory or something. Well, it's just, I saw this presentation that Doug did at the partners meeting, and my first thought was, okay, so if you want to have, it's a very clever idea. Here's a FileMaker server, but all you're doing is running the AI stream on it. So you can have it on a specialized instance that fits with that. But my first thought was, okay, well, if you're doing that, are you literally just going to, so you could have an install of FileMaker server, and as part of the installation, you say, so at the moment you say, if it's 0 for a master machine and 1 for a slave machine for WebDirect, you could have another choice, which was 2, it's an AI machine, and it could therefore install only the pieces it needs and the services it needs to be able to optimize is the word I'm looking for, isn't it? To optimize the installation, so you're not installing loads of pieces that need extra maintenance, take up resources. Because the point about this is, if it's resource hungry, you want to have the maximum resources in your server at that thing. That's where it came from, and it was, and Doug's answered the question, which is, hey, we're kind of thinking about working towards maybe that being a possibility. But it struck me as the obvious thing to do if that's what you're doing.
I agree. I think that's a sensible thing, and I think if you're working in a VM stack and you could then dedicate resource to a AI worker, then that should be great. Sorry, Beverly, where you go?
Yeah, I was kind of answer the same thing. And what Doug was saying is that if we set this up as it's FileMaker server with no databases, and that's kind of like, okay, lights on, no web direct needed anyway, because we don't have databases on that server. It's just the LLM stuff. Am I on the right track, or did I miss something?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But if you look at a couple of years ago, we decided to actually sort of rename FileMaker server to Claris server, because there's always this vision that the Claris server can do more things than just basically hosting FileMaker 5. If we eventually manage to be able to, and I'm sure we eventually get to this point of having a on-premise version of Connect and on-premise version of Studio, it would need to run in an environment that people already kind of know. So, yeah, the FileMaker server could potentially just be a Claris server running services for Claris.
I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for that, Doug. That's very interesting and very helpful. Actually, you mentioned a bit more coming up and stuff. I talked to Ronnie today, and hopefully he's going to come and present at the next one as well. So we might get some insights from him next time as well. So hopefully that'll be interesting. Do we want to carry on with this, or do we want to move on to Kate's presentation? Actually, just before Kate's, I'll make an explanation. But if you're happy to move on, we can move on. Or have other people got other questions now for Doug? Nope. Sorry, Doug. No more questions for you.
Cool.
Got a cheap night, Doug. You did well.
Well, I've got to prep for another meeting in 10 minutes. I'm going to sadly have to leave you. But it was nice seeing everyone.
Oh, it's great to see you, and thank you very much for doing that at short notice. That was really helpful.
Cool. Thanks.
In which case, the next item is something that came out of the last meeting in the bar, I think, largely. We were all getting very overexcited about AI and what it could do, and whether we could actually use it to leverage FileMaker and any Claris products that we could lay our hands on. So we came up with this idea of a thought experiment between Kate and Chris Ippolite. Is that the right way to pronounce his name? I think it is. I'm sure someone will correct me if it's wrong. I threw the two of them together to see what they'd come up with, and they've come up with something. Unfortunately, Chris has been called away last minute, but he's done a video which we'll run first, and then I'm going to hand over to Kate, and she can take you what they've been up to and what she's been up to, which I think is it's going to be really interesting. So just allow me a couple of moments to see if I can find this video, which I carefully put somewhere handy for tonight. I think this is it.
I'll just preface it a little bit too, that yeah, Chris and I were both approaching using Claris Connect with AI to some capacity, to some degree, and both doing different things with it, but kind of collaborated a little bit on how, you know, how we're taking advantage of LLMs in terms of the, you know, supplying it with a knowledge library and the set of instructions, right? So we both kind of took our own approaches to the prompting. And so yeah, so Chris made a recording because he had to be in the flight, although I'm supposed to say actually that this is an AI generated so this may or may not be Chris, so you can believe what you want to believe.
Yeah, I think he's been using the new voice feature on the iOS, hasn't he? Record your own voice.
Yes.
Anyway, I've got it lined up now, so I'll jump in there and run it.
I'm sorry I cannot join you in person. I'm currently 30,000 feet in the air going to a last minute engagement. So I regrettably am not able to join you live because I really look forward to hearing people's thoughts and joining in on the conversation here. So I'll watch the recording, but also if any of you see me in Austin later this month, I'd love to chat with you about your thoughts on this. So just to kind of set the table of what we're doing here, a couple, maybe few different user group meetings ago, we were really all pontificating over agents. And I had thrown out a thought experiment that what if Claris Connect as sort of a platform could become an agent platform? It is not now. It's actually quite far from that. But the thing that I was really focusing on there in that thought experiment was instead of having to use the Claris Connect platform and IDE to create flows, what if you could just in natural language explain what your problem is, and then it could identify all the different actions within your problem, map them over to actual connectors and their use cases, and then create a flow. So I thought I would do an experiment, which I've done here, and I wanted to share it with you all so that you can kind of see a little bit about how that might work, and at the same time, learn a little bit how we get language models to map to certain functions. This is kind of similar to a function calling approach, sort of. But let me get into the weeds of it. So first of all, we have Claris Connect connectors. This is the Claris Connect reference website. And if you look at all these different connectors, you can see that each of them has a description. It has the triggers, if they have triggers, the configuration fields for a trigger. And for the other ones that have actions as well, too, it has actions, the configuration fields. It determines the data type and whether it's required. This is really all the information that you would need to be able to map natural language to these as different objects. It's just like function calling, but instead of functions, these are descriptions, for example. So what the language model is really good at doing is actually mapping natural language to other things. That's the whole idea of what, really where function calling comes from. So this is sort of a loose interpretation of that. So really what I need to do is get all of these descriptions. So what I ended up doing was doing web scraping. And I was able to turn all of these into JSON because language models love JSON. And also because the structure of JSON allows us to really kind of hide attributes of certain objects. Or for example, if you look at how some of these, sorry about scrolling really fast, but I've got all the utilities in here, which can be tools to an agent. One of the things that really defines what agents are is, of course, the planning aspect of it. The thing that I thought was really interesting about the whole Claris Connect as an agent platform thought experiment was that it has all these tools. Not only does it have tools like utilities and calculations and stuff like that, or even if-else, which I guess are technically utilities as well, but it also has all these endpoints, and the endpoints could either connect you to data sources, which is also important for agents to be able to execute, or actions, API actions, for example. So there's a whole bunch of those in Claris Connect. So you see here, I formatted these as JSON so that when you see Google Calendar, then I actually show what the actions are and then some attributes of the action. So it's a really good format for this. Now, I got a little overly ambitious. So in addition to scraping the connectors, I didn't get as far down the path as I wanted to with Claris Studio, but I decided to set up a bunch of little Claris Studio sample objects, added some objects to them, and then took screenshots, sent that over to a language model, and had the language model describe the views and then the objects within them. And honestly, that took way longer than I anticipated. So I just have an abbreviated list of the different views and some of the objects. And I did the same thing there. I created a JSON document like you see here, where it describes like a form, and here's some of the descriptions I got out of the form, and like the text and drop downs and all that kind of stuff. So once I had all the instructions essentially established into JSON format, and by the way, I tried to sync up the format of those JSON documents as much as I could to make it easy for the language model. Then what I want to do is create an assistant with this. So if you take a look at, get to this in a second. What we're looking at here is the iSolutions Intuition platform. This is something that we developed a few years back, which is basically an execution environment and an assistant builder, similar to GPT Builder, for example, but a tremendously more sophisticated because it has live access to all your data systems on the back end. So like, for example, if you have a FileMaker system, it can act as a data repository for your assistants. It also allows us a whole bunch of other things that aren't relevant to this discussion, but this gave me a great platform for being able to put this example together for you. So first of all, here are the studio building blocks. That's that JSON I was telling you about. Here are the connectors. And it's worth noting, 45,000 tokens. It's no joke. And even though I only did kind of an abbreviated version of it, 30,000 tokens for Studio. And then the rest of this is the instruction. And this is really where the magic happens in assistants or communicating with language models. I took some time to tell it the general behavior that I was looking for in this assistant. And then I described some of the things, like if you see something that requires visualization or interaction, to make that go to the Studio, the Claris Studio SmartFlow connectors, for example. And if not, if it's action, go over to Claris Connect. I gave it some rules, only use connectors that are explicitly in the list, and then like rules about how to construct a flow, like you need to start with the trigger and that type of thing. So I put all of these in here, and then I go into the chat session, and now we can test out what it looks like if you put in a natural language problem. Can it create a flow or the plan of a flow? I obviously converting this into an actual Claris Connect flow would require a whole lot of heavy lifting, but we can, came up with a format where we can visualize what the plan looks like. And I've combined that together with both the plan for studio interaction and the Claris Connect flow. So let's hold our breath, pray to the demo gods. And my wife's a teacher, so I'm gonna put in, as a teacher, I need a system to track homework submissions, manage deadlines, and notify parents about overdue assignments, and so on. So you see here, track homework submissions. So we're going to want to have some way that you can interact with homework, it's tracking deadlines. Systems should integrate with school data sources and provide real-time dashboards on student progress. So the notify is the part that is really where the activity comes into play here. So let's see what we get. So there's the problem statement, and the system is thinking. It's now going into all those different tokens, reading through it, looking at the instruction, and language models do a really good job of mapping this way. Again, like I mentioned with function calling. So let's take a look at what we got here. This is a markdown format that I fed into it that I said I wanted it to use to display. So if we take a look at it, there's the problem. And I'm going to actually zoom out and let's see what it said. So it gives us a little summary of the implementation down there and how we can actually go in and create this in Studio. But here we go. It says, let's use a dashboard, which would give the ability to track student progress and maybe some visualization, and a form to capture homework. That's the main one. And then here's the proposed Claris Connect, the trigger, the flow. The trigger is new data entry in the Studio. So whenever you enter something in there, it uploads the homework. And then you can use the calculations connector to check deadlines, or you could, leverage a calendar or something like that. And then the action, the notify part, if you remember, here it's choosing the AWS SES send email notification. I could have maybe said something like, what if I want to notify, notify via Slack instead, right? So let's just see how dynamic it is. And voila, Slack instead. Well, here we go. So we should get pretty much the same thing. Let's see what we get. So trigger new data entry, action, check deadlines, and then instead notify parents via Slack. So the general idea here is we can, in fact, based on this experiment, map natural language problem statements to actions, or in this case, Claris Connect steps, and even interactions with Claris Studio. So hope you find this interesting. I look forward to hearing what everybody thinks about it in the recording, and also when I see some of you in Austin. Thanks so much for your attention.
Over to you, Kate.
All right.
That was
Thank you.
amazing.
I do have bot Chris available, maybe if people have questions. Anybody have any questions about what he demoed there? Okay. Well, we'll come back to that if we need to, but I'll just dive into my part. So I'm going to share my screen. So I had an idea at one point about using AI, using LLMs to create custom connectors for Claris Connect. And anybody that's not familiar, I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with Claris Connect, of course, but custom connectors are just, strictly a way within Claris Connect to build your own connector for any API out there, right? So it uses, it's just strictly a JSON schema that's, here we go. Yeah, so this is the JSON schema. Claris Connect has some documentation on their website, of course, about how to create these custom connectors. The way their schema defined, there's this help document that's pretty detailed, although it's not perfect. And this was part of my findings that were kind of interesting around, how valuable it really is in the instructions for them to be so precise, right? Because as we're learning more with LLMs, if there's some ambiguity in there, then that's going to be problematic. But I figured, well, why wouldn't this work if I've got my documentation here? I've got the definitions of, here's how to create a custom connector. I can point it to an API that exists out there, point it to the documentation for that API, and then have the LLM pull together and create that JSON schema. So I was first playing with ChatGPT and building a custom connector a custom GPT in ChatGPT to do that. So that, I had these very because again, this is an example of that's the repetitive response, right? It's always going to generate the same type of response. But I also was very curious about different models out there and seeing how they compare, because obviously there's so many models, there's so many options on the market, and I think each one kind of has its own pros and cons and flavors. And of course there's reasoning models out there, and I'm curious, well, why would you want a reasoning model versus a traditional model, and so what are the pros and cons, the benefits? So I did an experiment and I found this service called Magi, which is it's an AI aggregator. And I think there's others out there on the market, but this is just the one I found. But if you, what it allows you to do is I've got an option of all these different models. So there's a limited, it's not every single model out there, but there's a limited number here. But I can choose any model that I want to use. And then this is what they're calling personas, but these are really the same as a GPT. So these are pre-formed templates in the system. And then this is one that I created called Claris Connect Custom Connectors. So this is my set of instructions and what I built. And that's really that's where the majority of this work really is in creating the prompt. And I'll show you, just to show you what the personas look like. I've got this set of instructions here, which is very, very long, and I'll show you in a different format where that looks like. I've got some uploaded files. So this is part of my knowledge base. These are some of the sample custom connectors that I just took from Claris Connect. So they have a sample one for autopilot, these ones right here. So I just copied and pasted these and created those into text documents. And you can see I'm allowing the ability for web search because, and I'll touch on this a little bit more like as we look at this. And this opens up kind of a can of worms for me because I want my connector, my GPT here, or persona, whatever we want to call it. I want the LLM to be able to go out. So if I say I want to build a custom connector for Google Maps, I want to be able to go and look at the API documentation and scrape that from the web or research it, and look at it. Now, adding that capability is, although I can allow it here, we know that not all models allow for web search. So part of this is kind of embedded in this platform. Magi and I need to understand a little bit better about what's happening here. But as I'll show you, even with some of the models like Claude 3.7 that does not have web capabilities as a tool, let's say, it's still accessing the APIs that I'm pointing it to. And I'm the only reason I can assume is that it was part of the training data, and maybe somebody, and this is kind of what I'm trying to get to the bottom of right now. And so maybe people will have a comment on that as well. But this is let me show you the prompt here, right? So these are the set of instructions that I have for my persona there. And this is I think this is 8 pages long. So I really fleshed this out a lot. And I used, again, I'm using LLMs to help me build my prompts. So it's you kind of get into this circular approach with this, which I think makes sense for me, so I built it out in a very structured way. I wanted to make sure that, as I'm going through the chat interface, there's very specific steps that are happening. So I'm asking for a specific API, then I want it to search the web for the official documentation. If you don't have web access, pause and let me know immediately. Again, that's not getting 100% accurate results, but and then provide a link to the documentation so I can verify that. So there needed to be a few steps to just verify, hey, we're on the right track. This is definitely the API I want to use. The other more complicated steps where I wanted more human interaction was with the authentication method, because again, documentation levels vary, right? So sometimes the documentation might refer to the authentication method in a slightly different language. So I needed to say, okay, let me confirm the authentication method so I can make sure that's right, because in a custom connector with Claris Connect, getting the authentication method correct and will determine which fields are required. So that was really essential. And then after I confirm that the authentication method is correct, I've got some steps here. This is a great line. I know people have probably been using this. Take a deep breath, go step by step. Is kind of one of those I don't know, phrases that you can use if you want to get your model to be a little bit more using that chain of thought, step-by-step process that reasoning models are doing naturally, but other models may not be. But I like that take a deep breath, that you're telling this AI model to take a deep breath. It's just kind of funny. So, and then I'm actually having it build the custom connector. So those are my set of instructions. And then here in this section, I really have, this is so much just detailed rules about what the JSON schema should look like. So again, I couldn't rely 100% on, I did upload a PDF to those knowledge files that I showed earlier of these instructions. But part of the problem with these instructions and the ambiguity is that, for example, where is it? No, endpoints. I guess it's under required. No. It's under the auth request. Well, I can't find it now, but sometimes it says, yes, or know when something actually is required if the authorization is a method is a certain type. And now I'm can't finding where that is in the documentation. But anyway, having this as a PDF was not enough to get as accurate results as I wanted. I wanted to be able to create the JSON and be able to copy, paste it in here, and go. And I found that after, again, an iterative approach with my prompt, I was able to get it pretty darn close. And it's not 100%, which is interesting, but I'll show you some of the errors that were generated and how I went through it with the different models and how they reacted, which was interesting. So some lessons learned. So I won't go through all this, but as you can see, like this just got into these very precise instructions, and I included further examples sometimes about, I mean, I just had to make it really explicit, like the type field is mandatory, do not omit this, and here's what it's going to look like. So the more information I provided here, the better my output was, which I guess is something, yeah, we're all learning about prompt engineering, that having this really robust prompt is going to get you the most reliable results. So those are my steps in building my persona. And then I went ahead and tested this. I just built a small FileMaker database just to demonstrate the results. But I tested with these 7 models. I wanted to compare some that were, well, this is a traditional model versus this one has reasoning capabilities. Some are, of course, hosted models will, like what we've got, like more that have their own set of guardrails, let's say, with with OpenAI and Claude, Gemini, and then I wanted to try DeepSeek and Mistral as well. So this kind of gave me a broad area of comparison to be able to compare these different models and how they return. So then I went through and actually just used an API called the Country API, which is a really easy, straightforward one. And again, like this is probably going to vary the results. I didn't test any APIs that required OAuth because I didn't want to deal with that complexity at this point, but that could be obviously a little bit more complex. But this is a pretty straightforward free API. So that's the one I chose to start with. Then I went through, and for each of these, I'll show you just the chat. It's really very simple. And actually, I'm thinking maybe what we should do is try this. I think this is a little bit brave, and I don't know if we have time for this, but like I'm willing to say, if we have a vote, if somebody wants to pick out a model right here, I'm willing to give it a shot. If anybody has one that we didn't try yet, then I'll take us through the exercise. Anybody want to throw anything out? Can everybody see that okay?
As well as the different models, the different sizes, say like a Llama smaller one, like say Llama 3.2, like one of the, like an 11B versus 70. I would expect the 70 is going to be better, but I'm curious how much. If that makes sense.
Okay, let's try it. So actually, let me create a new chat here. Okay, so I'm going to say create a Country API connector. And now we may have to do a little bit of waiting here. Let's see how it's going to make. Okay, asking the user. Okay, so this is interesting. I just said that, but we'll that's okay. Country API. Okay. This user confirm that the API, and that is the right documentation, although I should probably check it. Yeah. although I would probably go to this URL. And again, like this is where I don't think it actually matters, because I don't think, I mean, Llama's not going to be actually looking at this page, but I'll go ahead and point it here anyway. All right. I've located that documentation. The authentication uses a bearer token, which can be obtained with API keys. So I know this is right because I've used this one before, but that's what it says. So I'm going to, but then it says here, I'll need more information about the authentication values. Can you please provide the details of how to bear? Well, that's interesting. I'm just going to say yes, because I don't think I mean, I know how to get the API key. I already have the API key, so let's see what it spits out. Okay. So here is, okay, so this is wrong here. So now auth component, it's saying type OAuth 2. So I don't know why, yeah, it's obviously not doing this correct. So at this point, this is kind of unusable. Like I wouldn't be able to really continue. I mean, I could keep correcting it and say, no, it's not OAuth 2.0 because we just verified it's a bearer token. So I'd have to kind of keep talking through it. And let's just try that. No OAuth.
By suggesting the smaller model, I may have ruined your demo. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that's what's interesting about like testing this out. And then it gives you that experience, right? Of like, oh yeah, well, this is really what, okay, so now let's see what it said. Auth components type none. That's right. And then auth request type bearer token. I mean, I guess that would be correct. So I'm going to say, okay, looks good. And this is, you know, to the point that Yul made earlier, and I think we were reiterating too, is that this stuff still isn't good enough that I could create this and without me knowing, understanding custom connectors to a degree and understanding APIs to a degree, I would get lost here, right? Because of the hallucinations or the errors that are getting in the output. Like it's not that you can 100% rely on it, but it is a time saver. It's generating all this JSON for me that I can then use as a starting point. And I guess that's kind of what we're finding, but there's no way to rely on it 100% at this point. Although I did have some other ideas about how I was going to iterate on this process using some other tools. So, okay, so here's my entire connector. And let's just go ahead and try this out. So I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to copy it. Okay, I have a new connector. I'm going to paste it. All right, this was my first thing. I check right up here. Okay, there's one thing red. So actions. Yeah, so this is, why is it starting with actions? Yeah, this one is kind of unusable. This is funny. Oh, I see. It left off all the authentication pieces entirely and just generated the, oh, maybe I didn't copy the whole thing. Hold on. So it created it in separate pieces, right? So here's the endpoints, here's the actions. Okay, well, yeah, unfortunately, I can't fully demo this aspect of it, but let's look at the other ones that I did create. So this was these are my results, and that this is a little bit subjective, of course, but the way I did this, and I'll take you through the top results. So Sonnet 3.7 was the best, and GPT-01 was the best. Now, Sonnet 3.7 is a hybrid model, but I believe in this capacity, and again, because I'm using Magi, I wasn't exactly sure if the reasoning mode was enabled, and I don't think it was. That would be my best guess, is this is 3.7 without reasoning. So when I go in here, so this is what I did. I just here's the entire schema that it spit out. And this is pretty accurate. Like it followed the steps well, it paused exactly when it needed to, it gave me the things. This is the interesting thing. It was a typo. I mean, it was, I don't know. So the error, and I highlighted it down here, right? So in the endpoint, it wrote region-block ending with a K, but the API documentation is spelling region block like that. So I think this is what's so interesting is it's almost like a typo, right? It's like any of us could be, you know, if we're not copying and pasting the endpoint directly, we might accidentally throw a K in there or a hyphen in there or something. And that was really the only error. So, and I'll show you this one. So when I copied and pasted, and actually let's just go ahead and do this now. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to create a new connector and I paste it here. And so this is where I don't get any errors, right? So I copy and paste and it's ready to go. Now, the fact is we do know there's an error because it's not going to validate in the JSON's validator right here, but it's going, because that endpoint doesn't exist. So where I'm going to see it now is I'm going to save and test. I'm going to hit sign in and I do have an API key right here. Okay. So I've got that. So it's returning results there. I'm going to test the get all countries action or endpoint. Is it responding? Hold on. Doesn't want to respond to that one. Let's see. All right, get the name of the country, Italy. Okay, that responds. Capital, Rome, language, Italian. There's a theme here. Region, Europe. So this was like, to be able to generate this and get this, I mean, it took me a while to be able to, to be able to just get the prompt good enough to be able to do this. But then, okay, so this is the one, this is the block that we know is misspelled. So this is where it gave me an error. And this is where then I had to go back and think, okay, what's wrong with this? And then I found the spelling error. But it's pretty good, you know, given the tools that we have with Claris Connect and this debugger and the editor, and the fact that, yeah, I mean, these LLMs are excellent at generating JSON. So this was, it was really refreshing to be able to get this really positive response. Just to show you some of the other ones. So with GPT-01, again, it was the same. It was a typo. It just added a K to region block. So I don't know. It's interesting to see that there's a pattern here, that that LLMs can really struggle with, like it in that concept of, yeah, like it's not looking exactly at the API documentation. It's not reading it word for word, right? There's this prediction element to it. And of course, like the algorithms that are happening within these LLMs are, I mean, there are probably very few people can completely understand it about how these are generating, but it's remarkable to be able to get it that close and then notice it's just a spelling error. This was really wild. So with Mistral, I had it follow the instructions. It followed the instructions really well. And then it returned an image. So it's a multimodal model. So it actually gave me an image of something. And let me see if I can bring this up. Go into my chats here. Country API. Oh, was this the Mistral one? I think I changed. I don't know how I lost it there. All right, well, you'll just have to take my word for it until I can find it. But it returned an image. And then I said, that's an image. I want my output to be JSON. And it said, oh, I'm sorry, I generated an image of a penguin. And it was not an image of a penguin. It was an image that looked like an image of JSON code. But of course, LLMs can't generate images or diffusion models. I don't know exactly what model. Well, anyway, that can't generate images that have text on it that are legible, right? So it didn't make any sense. Refer to it as a penguin, which was very strange. And then again, we had another typo. It called regional block instead of region block. So again, having problems with that one endpoint was really interesting. Another typo, region block or regional block. It renamed the object URL field instead of URL fields. This was using GPT 4.0, which again, like these are pretty good results, like in a way, because they're simple. These are simple things to be able to change. And then I tried Gemini 1.5, and there were a number of errors there. It started hallucinating some type, some fields that weren't part of the schema. So it started adding fields to the schema, like here, type and required. And then, for most of them, when I generated the connector, it would have, like these full, 7 or 8 endpoints. So pretty complete. It included all the endpoints. But with Gemini, it left out 4 endpoints. So it only had, 4 endpoints in there instead of, let's see. Yeah, instead of all full 8 of them. And same with Gemini Flash 2.0, missing 3 endpoints. It hallucinated an endpoint called code countries, or code and countries. I think there were 2 that didn't exist. So it pulled those out. So there were a number of errors here that would just take me a lot longer to kind of go through and fix all these problems, because there was a lot more. And then DeepSeek, I guess that one was so terrible I didn't even paste it in here. I can't remember. There was just a whole lot of hallucination errors, typos, missing endpoints, which is really interesting, right? Because yeah, there's been so much hype about DeepSeek and reasoning models. And yes, there are good purposes for reasoning models, but in some cases, it's not exactly what we want. And in this very particular case, where I need a very specific output in a scheme of JSON that needs to be specific. So I'm not looking for ambiguous results. Like, they have to be completely specific. So I found this to be an interesting experiment to kind of go through the different models. And then I tried with a different API, and I got different results. So I won't go through these one by one unless people are really curious. I don't know how much time I have, you will, but for these ones, Gemini, Flash, and Gemini Pro were much better. Mistral was the third, and ChatGPT was terrible at these. So it's. I think there's subtleties here, and there's so much to understand when it comes to this technology that I'm still trying to come to grips with. I touched on the web scraping aspect of things, which I still can't completely figure out. Like, yeah, are these LLMs actually, when I put in, let's say, here, I'll pull this one up. This is the 3.7. This is just the chat history. So I'm telling it I want it to use the country API. Oops. Sorry, everybody. Website's not wanting to cooperate. But when I point it to that URL, right? So I'm saying, no, this is the documentation right here. I'm saying this is the documentation right here. And it says, thanks for providing the documentation link. And then it's able to very successfully generate it very successfully generate the authentication and then the rest of the connector with just a few. I'm just saying, yes, that's it. I'm not giving it any more information. But as far as I know, yeah, 3.7 is not connected to the internet. So how it's gaining that, it must be somewhere in the training data is my only assumption. And this is where I'm kind of like glad to be in a user group, and maybe other people can help pull this apart for me. But understanding the data that is accessible to the LLMs at what point, and also curious to hear other people's experience with these different models, because I do think I don't think that there's a great benefit in a tool like this, except for in this case when you really want to compare things. But in the end, I don't think we should all need to have multiple models. There might be certain models that are better at other things, or maybe it's really about cost or about privacy or about security, might be why we choose one model over another. But how do we make those decisions? And then, of course, seeing this as a use case for, here's a pretty good use case for, when you're able to create something that's usable in Claris Connect in a fairly, again, it is a time saver when I can just generate it and it works well, right? But if it doesn't work well, then kind of works against us. And obviously a lot of work went into creating this prompt, and that's really where all of this is happening. And I was just so curious, even too, comparing this to the back where we started with Yule. Your prompt was nothing. There was no prompting, Claude there. It was just like, here, what do you know about FileMaker? Do this. And what are the true benefits we're getting from putting so much into a prompt versus maybe keeping things a little simpler, knowing that we're going in the direction where truly this technology should be getting smarter and smarter, and I shouldn't have to be so, explicative in every single, way we are making our prompts.
Yeah.
So,
definitely agree with that.
yes. So that's all I've got to share. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm so glad to be here again, because last time I was interrupted a lot by my daughter. So I'm glad I got to finally finish a presentation here.
But no, that was great.
Yeah.
That was fascinating and really, really interesting. And thank you so much for putting that work in. And it's it's fascinating to see. And that was, a totally different approach to to the prompts, for sure. And I do wonder what would happen if you had not been as explicit in your prompts. Did you sort of try during the process when you were building them up to see what happened with a less explicit prompt?
Yeah, so I think, it's definitely, it's an iterative process. So I started with a much shorter prompt, and then I would find that I couldn't get it in here without, 5 or 6 errors, right? Just copying and pasting the prompt, or copying and pasting the JSON as it was. So then I would just go in and I would say, and I would look at it and look at my output and say, oh, well, there's an error here. So then I would go back into my prompt and say, never do this, or, always do this. Yeah. Or I'd add an example into the prompt, like, well, this is actually how this is what it's supposed to look like. And I would add that example, and then it would fix that. So that's how I worked through the processes, like testing and that iterative approach. Yeah.
It's interesting. Do you think even at this stage, you said you're a bit unsure about whether it saved you time because of the difficulty of when you came across something that wasn't right? Do you think it overall at this stage it saves you time? Would save you time?
Again, like I think it would. I think it does again, but it saves you time if you're familiar with APIs, if you're familiar with REST APIs, and you still need to be the expert on this, of course, right? So I think it's a valuable tool for creating, if you want to create a lot of custom connectors in a variety of APIs, knowing that you can go in and then fix all the errors in there rather than writing it completely from scratch. I do think it does, but it's kind of like a transfer of time, because putting this all together and building the request takes
Yeah.
a lot of time, right? And tweaking it and updating it. And so there's that consideration as well. It's almost just like programming is changing, but we're still spending as much time programming. To me, it seems like.
Definitely. I just noticed in the chat, Heidi's put a comment about you have to use a
Oh
web
yeah.
tool. I don't know if you saw that one.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
It's just a directory of some prompts that you can do.
Yeah. Oh,
And yeah, I mean, the best coding so far right now is Python, JavaScript, and using SQL because that's what it's trained on. But I assume you could fine tune a model to help people do this, right?
right.
Oh,
Well,
and
and this is
React.
also
React
where-
is also a huge stack that a lot of the tools are, is in the stack that a lot of tools are using.
Right. And I think this is where also the door opens to agents, right? Like I've hit the wall right here. And if I have a web scraping tool, which I could incorporate if I were to build an agent, and maybe that's going to be phase B of this, then yeah, I can be sure that I'm getting the most recent documentation, that it's reading, and that it's reading the parameters correctly. The other thing that I just discovered is that in in OpenAI's API, and maybe other of these models in their APIs have these tools, but they have like this structured output tools, right? So in addition to being able to call functions like what Ian was demonstrating, OpenAI has this ability to return JSON, and you can program it with the JSON schema that you want returned. So what I would do if I were to go this approach is I would have to generate, and I just did this to test it out. This isn't correct, but there's a tool here to be able to generate, well, I want the JSON schema of what the Claris Connect JSON schema should look like, right? So converting all of these rules right here into JSON schema that defines what the structure would look like. And if I were to supply this to the calls, then I could get that more 100% like reliable responses. I don't know if anybody has tried this approach yet.
Basically pretty much anything with agents requires the structured output from the models. And so
Right.
actually the code example you've got there of getting a structured response. So where you just
down here.
were,
Yeah.
that chunk of Python code. So Pydantic, the first line where it says Pydantic is it's a Python library that basically forces structured data, that makes it, and once you've got that, then it can output structured JSON that's like exactly as you want it, and enforce it. There'll be something similar. You've probably got an example there for JavaScript as well, I'm sure. But
I think so. Not all
models. So a Zod response format is
right.
Yeah,
so it's
Zod
telling
is
you, which models support this.
Yeah. So
they also have a thing called JSON mode, but that just means it's going to return JSON, not necessarily in the schema that you're defining.
But I mean, it's moved along a long way, because like a year and a half ago, you'd see all these prompts and like basically people essentially begging the LLM to give them JSON, phrasing it in so many different ways. Don't give me anything but JSON. Don't explain anything. Just give me JSON, please, pretty please. And it would only work like half the time. But this has made it much better.
And like, Ian, my understanding is DeepSeek doesn't return JSON or proper JSON, does it? Yeah, because it's not done that. So probably too well, but yeah.
Maybe that's why my DeepSeek was terrible.
The R1
Although,
does,
this one was
R1
terrible
does
too.
not, And so I think the thing is that the mileage may vary. You have to get the right model to do what you want, or train a model to do what you want, which a platform should do, right? If they want people to be able to use code assist in the platform.
Right. Yeah. So I just think it's really interesting, and I guess we all kind of touched on that about, you know, agents really are the next step here, because when you have such, the response really needs to fit in those parameters. Having an LLM, only an LLM, isn't enough.
Actually,
So
there's
Kate,
one-
looking
Yeah.
beyond this to, sorry, Ian, you want to go ahead?
Okay, I was going to say there's one other thing you might be able to do, and that's rather than looking at the text documentation for these things, connect directly to the Open API documentation, which basically gives you a JSON document describing all the details of the API. Maybe that would kind of getting the JSON that describes it would get you further down the road quicker.
The JSON that describes this, that describes the connect schema.
Oh, sorry, no, the schema of the APIs that you're connecting to.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Instead of like
Yeah,
here.
because
Yeah.
basically, so actually, if you went to country API, if you just change the URL on country API at the end, just
Mhm.
instead of documentation, try docs. No, okay, because a lot of APIs, if you got the endpoint for the API, many of them, if you type put /docs at the end, will actually give you a JSON document that describes
Oh,
exactly what the API looks like.
well, let me see if I do an endpoint.
Possibly.
Let's try
It
that.
would be actually, it would be the API /docs. No. Okay.
No. Okay.
And sometimes
Oh,
provide ability to download a JSON document. So it's kind
yeah.
of knowing that, like, say, for example, FileMaker server has got this available. It's got it available for some things, but not for all things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which ones are available and which ones aren't.
Right. 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 So it depends on how complete the
Yeah.
documentation is.
Actually, if you do a search, because what you're actually looking for, if you do a search for country API Swagger documentation.
Okay.
Because oh, that's a different one. No. But yeah, if you can find like the Swagger document, that's the format. The
Okay.
JSON format. It is a standard. So a huge number of, yeah. So like just there, for example, if you click on
Right
that
here.
one,
Yeah.
that's what it looks like. That essentially
Right. This
fully
is a different
documents.
API, but right. Right. Yeah. So having a database that had these, or
Yeah.
an API that had this, would be really
So like when
beneficial.
you see Postman generating the code, sample code, that's what it's looking
Mm-hmm.
at.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Fascinating.
So that might.
We're still recording. We're at 9 o'clock. Well, we're past 9 o'clock. Do people want me to just switch off recording and carry on chatting now? Officially end the meeting and move to the bar? Or have you got anything else you'd like on record for the video?
I think that's all I've got. Yeah.
Okay, in which case I'm gonna officially close the main meeting, and I'll stop recording in a second, and feel free to just carry on chatting as long as you want. If it gets too late for me, I'll just leave it running and leave the meeting open, so it'll finish whenever it finishes.